All right, guys, thanks for joining me today for the offensive lab environments without the suck. So who am I? My name is Travis. My pronouns are Vi and Vim. That's also my editor of choice. Creator of Dad Joke. That's really my day job, what I'm all about, what I do. To get a hold of me, Twitter and 70 centimeter, 2 meter. I'm a general ham license holder. I go by at W9HAX on both mediums. And then lastly, I'm the proud member of the Trusted Sec targeted operations team. I get to work with some really sharp guys there, and actually that's where Mr. Advar Mo created my meme that is also serves as my avatar. But a red team Rambo, that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. So mainly red teaming activities, penetration tests, things of that nature. So what's our mission today is our mission, I go back about a year and a half ago when I was actually asked to join our targeted operations team. I was working with our force team for a while, which was doing normally external and internal style penetration tests. So it might be a 1 week or a 2 week style engagement where you go against a client, maybe you drop a device, you do your thing, you get in, you get out, you kind of move on. But with this transition to this targeted operations team, more of a red team style approach, it was much more of a mature client base, people that the engagements might go on for a month or two. And a lot of it was with the goal of remaining stealthy or, evading detections and seeing how far you could get while you're up against all the defenses. So when I joined the team, my mission was, Travis, go ahead and get command and control of a client, their endpoint, with all the defenses turned up, and do it repetitively. So I started asking myself, what does it take to get command and control of a client with all the defenses turned up regularly? And a lot of times you'll hear this, and it kind of segues into the slide is my red team grievance slide, is attackers only have to be right once, right? I mean, how many of you guys have heard that saying? All right. I guess another show of hands. How many people are blue versus red? Blue, raise your hands. Cool. So you guys are the ones that say this, right? Red. All right. About a 60-40 split, I'd say right now. So I say this and I'm like, I get it. I hear, I know what they're saying. I know why they're saying it. But also, I'm thinking of from the attacker's perspective, what do I need to do in order to get command and control of the workstation? So things like, a command and control server, C2, right? What does that include? Things like redirectors. Maybe I'm using like a cloud proxy service. Maybe various cloud assets, whether it's, AWS or Azure or whatnot. Things like payloads. Once I have that infrastructure in place, the C2, how am I actually going to get detonation? Is my payload going to be keyed? Is it signed in some degree? Is it evasive? Is it getting around Defender? Is it getting around CrowdStrike? Right? What about if the company has a corporate proxy? Right? Is my traffic going to be categorized? Is it going to get out to where it needs to, or is it going to get shut down? And a lot of these things I have to figure out before I even engage with the client, before I send them that payload, because I could send them something, it could be burned within a minute, and the whole op, they're like, oh, yep, we know Trusted Sec's engaged with us now, and now they're onto us. So how can I be stealthy from the start? And a lot of that involves testing and, testing in a lab environment and doing so efficiently. So what are my objectives today? Well, it's doing it live versus testing in a lab. And I want to do it in the lab, but I want to do it like we've been doing it, but better. How many people have built labs in the past? And then that lab turns to dust. It doesn't get updated, right? It's just a constant like, oh, I spun it up, maybe spend a day or two spinning it up, but it doesn't really get the attention it needs. And then, you move on to the next client. They have a different environment. You got to, either burn it down to the ground or spin it up again, right? We're going to do it, but we're just going to do it in an automated way. Another useful thing with this, this presentation, this methodology that we're doing is it's really useful for consultants, but also students as well. I could only imagine when I went through school back in 2001, if I had something like this where I could spin up a lab, spin it down within, a matter of an hour or so. We were pulling out hard drives out of hard drive days back in the, 2001 era. And then more time testing, less time fussing. That's huge too. A lot of this stuff is automated. I can click it, an hour later, I'll come back and my environment's ready to go, ready for me to test. And then the cost effectiveness, and that kind of gets into my my next slide, is the hardware. So I kick back to a story. My team lead, Jason Lane, Curious Jack on Twitter, one time a while back, this is back in 2010 era, he came across some servers, some retired Dell 710 servers on eBay. There were two of them this guy was selling on eBay. He's like, hey, Travis and my buddy Casey, he's like, hey, take a look at these servers. He sent it out in our HipChat client. He's like, I was thinking about this for a home lab, and we're like, ooh, that's a nice Dell R710 server for a reasonable price. And while he wanted to get our opinion on it, me and Casey clicked add to cart. We bopped and swiped them out right up from under his feet. So lesson learned, if you're gonna find a cool piece of retired hardware, don't send it out to your team first for their input because they're gonna take it from you. Rug pull. But nowadays we don't need the big R710 servers, right? The things that are just, sucking 250 watts, just like pulling power. Sounds like a freight train going on in your basement. We don't need that anymore. We can use like things like Nooks and Z workstations, whatnot. And that's kind of what I went with. Is I found a HP Z workstation for under $300. I got 32 gigs of RAM. It uses 30 watts of power, and I've used other things too, like Super Micros and whatnot. A lot of those mini PCs are really the way to go nowadays. They're just a little box sitting out there, and it's running a huge lab environment. Really neat. And in my case, sub $300, again, 32 gigs of RAM. It's got a Xeon processor, 3.4 gigahertz, all for $300. This is something a student can probably afford if they budget for it, but a professional, really easy to get cooking with these kind of lab environments. And you'll notice this is a Windows machine, right? Cringe, right? I've got servers at home. I got a Proxmox server at home. It's running all my infrastructure. But in this case, it's Windows, and there's a reason for that. And that reason is Automated Lab. Who here has used Automated Lab in the past? Cool. Well, I only saw like one hand. So this is going to be really useful. I'm excited about it. Automated Labs is just like, I call it the kitchen. And within the kitchen, you use recipes to make things, right? So Automated Lab, it allows you to spin up lab environments and test environments really quick. You can spin them up on hypervisor. So yes, Windows, whether you're using server or Windows 11, but also you can run it up in Azure too if you don't want to do it on-prem. This does things like including a single VM super quickly or a huge inventory of recipes. And I'll show you what that looks like. While I get into it though, I'm not here to say Automated Lab is the best solution for home lab automation. There are other things out there. Things like Ludus is really popular right now. Anyone use Ludus in the room? Again, one or two. So that's really big right now. Ludus is good. They got, I know SpectraOps does a SCCM lab in Ludus that's all ready to go. But my take on the approach was let's use Automated Labs. I got really excited about it. Also, Snap Labs, our team has used in the past. And then if you want to kind of go like learning how to hack in the box. But I try to mimic AD environments as much as I can because that's what we see most of the time. Here's just a little, let's see, okay, it's gone. A little look at what Automated Labs is. So in this case, it's a PowerShell module you install, then you're ready to go. It's super easy. And then from here on the left, you see me scrolling down, I'll find some recipes. In this case, I'm going to find out hypervisor is what I'm running. And I'm going to go do a single lab with Office 2019 installed. So what you run this script in PowerShell, as long as you have the ISO file, it's going to spin up a single lab with Office installed. And think of what that's useful for. Think of your testing, you find a set of credentials on the internet, or you get someone that has winter 2024 exclamation point on the external. You want to use Office to connect to their email client, but maybe they have conditional access policies in there. Maybe you need a domain join machine. Maybe you found a piece of client software like a Fortinet VPN client or something that you want to install, but you don't want to install it on your personal box or your gaming rig or whatever you use it with Windows. This can be spun up in like 4 minutes. You just click go, you spin it up, and it's you got a burnable Windows machine you can spin up, spin down. Super powerful. Let's see what else Automated Labs offers here. Things like a PKI sample. So PKI, anyone heard of ADCS attacks, right? Certify and stuff. This is a great way to spin up an environment real quick to test some of those. And we'll go over that a little bit more during this talk. Lastly, another one I'll show you really hot right now is SCCM, right? SCCM and attack vectors. That's really big, and at least from what we see in an offensive standpoint, this is a great way to spin up an SCCM lab, test some of the new tools and techniques that are coming out, and then just spin it down when you're done. Really cool. So I got 3 labs I want to kind of showcase here. And the first one is our payload lab. This is my most common deployment. And it's really simple in nature. All it's doing is it's going out. I got a recipe that spins up a domain controller. It spins up a Windows routing server as well, then also a client workstation. And the thing I use this for is I can give it a domain. I can match my client's domain. And so when I test the payload, I can test, hey, can the payload detonate? Is it evasive? Is it getting around EDR? and can it make that callback? All those things that are very important. So when I land at a client and I send it off in a fish, or I send it in a seated axis where they're firing it, I know that there's a high likelihood that's going to call back and I'm going to be ready to go and not embarrass myself. And they're going to hear me breathe for 2 hours while I figure out why it failed. I'm going to test in a lab first. So let's see, this is kind of what a recipe looks like. This is a little convoluted. You don't have to just kind of get the general idea. At the very top, we're defining some virtual network definitions. So we're assigning a NAT interface and then also an a payload lab interface. That's going to keep everything segmented, talking to each other, but it's also going to get internet connectivity if you need it. Things like, pulling updates or pulling GitHub scripts or whatnot is very useful. Then I define my 2 machines. I've got a Windows Server DC. Importantly, I have a routing role. So that role is a root DC. That's going to do some post installation activities, make it a root domain controller. I've got a Windows routing server and then also a client workstation. So let's take a look at what that looks like being spun up. So in PowerShell, I open up a recipe, and really all I do is set a few things like a domain name here. You're going to see me going over to abc.com, set the domain name, and I click go. And then I sit back, and then 25 minutes later, I'm going to have a domain environment with a domain controller, a client workstation, and then a routing server. I'll kind of skip forward on some of this here. Let's see, I'm not sure how to skip forward in presentation mode. But it's kind of going through on the side. It's building the workstations, building the machines. Root domain controller's up, it's going. I'll kind of fast forward here. So we'll let that script finish, and it takes about 25 minutes in that case to finish. And then it spits out some output. What are the IP information? What are the details here? And what I'm going to do with this is, so I've created a domain here, thehive.com. I got a workstation joined to that domain. Now let's get a payload up and fired and make sure that I can call back here. And what I'm going to use is Metasploit, Meterpreter. We have our own internal C2, but let's just show the impact here. Is it's going to be Metasploit against a real-time enabled Windows Defender machine. And let's see if we have any success with it. Okay, hit F. Pick up this again. Let me go in here. There we go. Okay, now it's running. All right, so I got all my IP information for my lab environment. You're going to see I'm going to go up here. I got my domain controller, I got my router, and then I also got a Windows workstation here. We will log into the Windows workstation, I believe. Yep. And you're going to see one binary on the left-hand side once I log in here. Again, this was spun up in about 25 minutes. All I did was hit the go button. I have the Wild West Hacking Fest demo. I double-click that. Or I will double click that. First, I'm going to check and make sure Windows Defender is running here. Sure enough, Windows Defender is running. It's on. We'll click that. And what I'm using here is a tool called EK47. Is Kevin Clark in the room? Kevin Clark? I don't see him out here. Oh, there he is back there. So Mr. Clark in the very back in the green shirt wrote this awesome utility called EK47. And it allows me to create this payload using Metasploit and get around things like Defender. So if you are not familiar with EK47, I believe Kevin talked about it last year here at Wild West Hacking Fest. Great utility. But as you can see, the payload detonates, no detections, and boom, I got my Meterpreter session 1 open here, which is cool. I just got around Defender. That's kind of a neat little trick. So that's a very common, when we start an engagement, when we start operation, if you're a red teamer, within 25 minutes, I have detonation. I bypass EDR. That's pretty neat. Lab 2, this is like my TTP, or if I want to test a new attack, this is the lab I'm going to be using. And this is actually based on the awesome work of a guy named David Prow and then also Spirosec. It's really their work. I'm just kind of showcasing what they've done. So all credit to those guys. But Bad Blood, or Automated Bad Labs, is a way to create a domain. And the neat thing about it, it's going to populate this domain with users, with objects, with data, with group policies. And the neat thing about it is every time you spin it up, every time you run this recipe, the domain's going to change, the users are going to change, the groups of computers, all the vulnerabilities baked into this are unique every time. So it's not like you can own it once and then be like, all right, I already know it's Jay Smith is the admin, this is password. No, it changes every time you spin it up. So it's something neat, something unique every single time. So it's a great way to kind of like play around and get, test your prowess, your hacker prowess. Here's some of the attacker vectors that are built in. So things like Kerberos, if you want to test that. SMB signing, all these things, if you're a blue teamer that are showing up on your pen test, if you want to figure out more of how did the attacker do it, this lab's a great way to do it. Red teamers, if there's a new vector coming out, which I'm going to showcase, this is a great way to do it. Because as you go down this list here, you see at the very bottom right here, Active Directory Certificate Services, ESC 1 through 8. This is an old slide, so it's probably ESC through 13. But earlier this week, one of my coworkers, Justin Bollinger, created a new attack vector, ESC 15. Has anyone heard of that? ESC 15 came out this week on Monday. It was disclosed. So what we're going to do is we're going to, in the lab, create an ESC 15 condition and exploit it. And I think that's so cool because I created this recipe, I created a condition, I'm testing it, I'm exploiting the new code that came out within, well, this lab takes about 2 hours to build, but like you can test it, you can try it for yourself. That's sick. So this is what the topology of this lab environment is going to look like. Again, pretty simple. I got a VLAN switch with our 2 VLANs on them, domain controller, a certificate authority in this lab, and then also a client workstation. I'm not going to go through the clicking of, start the lab. It's the same process. You click start, it goes through, it builds it up. But you can see here, it's built the domain controller, the BBCA01, which is the certificate authority, then the workstation. Cool. That's all going. And let's see what this looks like live. I think I clicked. Yep, it's going. We're going to get into the certificate authority here. And we're going to launch an attacker box. So this is just a Ubuntu box. I'm going to use Certify here. I'm going to use the find condition. And this is the new branch, again, that was released within 3 days ago, or maybe 4 days ago now. So brand new attack vector. We're looking for something ESC 15. It attacks extended key usage of PKI here. So we'll cat it out. We're going to look for ESC conditions. Again, this is the lab we just created at the very bottom, ESC 15. Authenticated users can enroll. And so brand new attack condition, we're going to go ahead and exploit that real quick. All in a lab that we created within about 2 hours of time. So we'll go through. We'll do the requesting. We're requesting domain admin at thehive.com using application policies, client authentication. Boom, we get the certificate. And we're on our way to domain admin, in this case, this new ESC 15 vector. So again, all credit to Justin on this one. I just want to showcase how powerful these lab environments are. You can test an O-day in the matter of a couple hours. Pretty cool. SCCM. So we looked at the payload lab, we looked at ADCS, and now SCCM. I feel like SCCM for us attackers, red teamers, have been like the big hit this past 2024. It's what we're always looking for right now. SCCM holds a lot of data, a lot of configurations and whatnot, and we like to kind of poke through that, figure out what we can find. One of my coworkers, Adam Chester, created a way to extract NAA credentials from your SCCM policy, and that's what we're going to look at here in a lab environment. So again, with the recipe, we can quickly spin up a domain controller, SCCM server, a SQL database, and a client workstation on 2 different VLANs, make it all work. This takes probably a couple hours to, once you click the go button, you go have your coffee, come back maybe on team meeting, and you got a brand new lab environment ready to test. Really powerful stuff. So here's a snippet of that recipe running. You see the domain controller, the database server, the CM server, and also the workstation being provisioned, installing. Cool, everything went well there. This is the summary at the very end. So this one took 2 hours and 18 minutes to build. If you got a bigger, beefier box, maybe it's quicker or whatnot, but pretty cool. And then let's see what this attack looks like. Yep. So first of all, I'll pause it real quick before I get too far ahead. We're just using SCCM Hunter. This was written by Garrett Foster. I believe he's with Spectre Ops now. Super cool guy, super smart guy, dropping a lot of SCCM knowledge. He took what Adam Chester wrote and kind of put it into a different tool called SCCM Hunter. That's what we're using here. All we're doing is using low privilege credentials here. So assume you got a user, Jay Smith. He's low privilege, Hive123 is the password. You just apply the DC, you give it, hey, I want the find parameter, and it's going to go ahead and find the management endpoint. From there, we're going to go ahead and use HTTP to attack the endpoint, pull back the NAA credential policy here. It's going to decrypt it. It should decrypt it. Waiting 10 seconds. There we go. We have the SCCM NAA credential here. That's probably privileged in some capacity. It might not be privileged, but it probably has rights over certain machines, maybe workstation servers or whatnot. a really great way. We just got a good privilege escalation using low privilege creds to a high privilege account. That's SCCM Hunter. And again, if you haven't been familiar with SCCM Hunter, download Automated Labs, download the SCCM recipe, try it out for yourself, really figure out how these tools and techniques work. Connectivity-wise, I just put this in there because I like you give a call out. Has anyone used Tailscale in the room? Familiar with Tailscale? Tailscale is great. I feel like when 2021 when I first heard of it, like was my favorite thing. I'm like, how did I live without Tailscale? I used to be a roll your own open VPN kind of guy. And within like 15 minutes of having Tailscale, I decommissioned all that, tore it out because I'm like, I'm Tailscale all the way now. Tailscale's great if you haven't. But what I do is I create a burner account, in this case, TK Lab. All my machines in my lab environments will join to Tailscale. So whatever box I'm on, whether I'm on my box, on a test box, I just bind to that Tailscale cluster. And now I'm in my lab from any box, any attacker machine, connecting, attacking it without all the fuss of VPNs and whatnot. So consider in your lab environment, you just do a command, install Tailscale up, you advertise your local payload subnet, and you're now attacking from any box you want in any network. You don't have to worry about VLANs and routes and ACLs or whatnot. But that's about all I had. I just want to go through those 3 labs, how we use Automated Labs to really create efficiencies and replicate client environments really easy. So if we come across a thing like, hey, this weird database server talking to SCCM on this client, how can we go after it? We can rebuild that in our lab environments real quick within hours. Speaking of that targeted operations team, this is us out in Vegas this past year. We do 4 days of pretty intense training. And then on day 5, we rent some fast cars, included like Corvettes and a Cybertruck, get out to the Valley of Fire and just have some fun. Give a shout out to this team because really they are why I do what I do, and also why this talk kind of spawned. Using this team, our methodology, our knowledge to kind of come together and work. These guys push me every day. And I just want to give a quick shout out because with them, I wouldn't be up here. So the question was with Automated Labs, how can you get the license keys, things like for the ISO images? So we have the MSDN account, but I believe it's really easy to get evaluation licenses, and they will expire after 30 days, but none of these labs really ever stay up for more than 30 days. I'm spinning them down every other day, spinning them up. So evaluation licenses would work just fine for you. And I believe you just have to have a Microsoft account. You register for a free evaluation license. So, yep, 180 days. Yep, so there you go, 180 days. So really, if you don't have MSDN access, evaluation licenses, yep. So with the setup with that, there's a, like you give it the directory where all your ISOs are downloaded. So in this case, you'd want to download any ISOs. Once you get like a few servers, like a Windows 10 machine or Windows 11, you're pretty much ready to cook because most things run off Windows Server and ISO and then Windows like 11 or whatnot. Yep, Office as well. I think there's our evaluation licenses for that too.